First story, Taken in the Desert Night, 1991. I've been to that stretch of the Mojave Desert more times than I can count. It's quiet out there, the kind of silence that almost feels thick, like you can feel the weight of the air pressing against you. It was late September 1991 when it happened. I remember the sun was just beginning to dip, turning everything a deep amber, the kind of color that makes you feel like the whole world's about to burn. I was driving my truck down a desolate highway, headed back from a site I'd been working, and I wasn't in any particular rush, just letting the road take me like I had done hundreds of times before. But that night was different. The first thing I noticed was the temperature change. It wasn't just a drop, it felt like the air itself was thicker, heavier, almost suffocating. I had the windows rolled down, but it didn't help. I was suddenly sweating, my shirt sticking to my back. I figured it was just the desert playing its tricks, but it didn't sit right with me. Then, without warning, a light appeared in the sky. It wasn't a plane or a helicopter. It didn't make any noise. It was just there, hovering, slowly moving in a way that didn't make any sense. My mind raced to come up with an explanation, but deep down, I knew. This was something else, something that shouldn't be. I slammed the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop on the dusty road as the light grew larger and closer. I should have driven away. I should have kept going, but I didn't. I couldn't. Something kept me rooted in place, my hands gripping the steering wheel like I was waiting for something. For what? I didn't know. But I had to wait. The next few minutes were a blur, but I remember the light growing brighter, almost blinding, and then I wasn't in my truck anymore. I didn't hear anything, no sound, nothing. It was like the world had been shut off. I felt a tug, then a pull, and in the next instant I was inside this place. It was cold, unnaturally cold, and the air had a smell to it, like metal and chemicals, sharp and invasive. I was standing in what looked like a sterile room, but the walls, they weren't walls. They were smooth, almost liquid, shifting like they were alive. I tried to move, but my body felt wrong. Heavy, like something was pulling at me from every direction. My arms and legs wouldn't respond the way they should have. I was trapped in my own body. That's when I saw them, the beings. They were tall, far taller than any human. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, but it wasn't the kind of transparency that let you see through them. No, it was more like a thin film of skin that glowed faintly in the dark. Their eyes were massive, black, without any kind of pupil or iris, and they seemed to absorb everything around them. They didn't have any visible facial features, nothing to express emotion, but somehow I knew they were aware of me, watching me. It wasn't just a physical presence I felt. It was something else, something deeper. I couldn't explain it at the time, but I felt like they were inside my mind. There was a pressure behind my eyes, like they were pushing into my thoughts. They didn't speak the way we do. It wasn't words. It was more like feelings. A sense of calm, then confusion, then curiosity, and then fear. My own fear. I felt it raw and primal crawling up my spine. The beings moved closer and I couldn't move away. It wasn't like I had a choice. I felt frozen, paralyzed. One of them reached out toward me. Its hand, if you could even call it a hand, was long, with spindly fingers that looked like they could break me in half with just a touch. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. They were inside my head now, more than just observing. They were studying me. I felt a sharp, sudden pain in the back of my neck, and my vision blurred. Something cold and metallic pressed against my skin. I don't remember much of what happened after that, only flashes. I remember bright lights, strange instruments, and cold hands that poked and prodded as though they were searching for something inside me. They were probing. They were studying me. And somehow, I knew this wasn't the first time they had done this. It wasn't the first time they had done it to someone. But it was the first time they had done it to me. I don't know how long I was there. Time didn't make sense. It was like it was moving differently in that place. I tried to think of something, anything to hold on to. But my thoughts were slipping away, like they were being dragged into a dark hole I couldn't climb out of. It was the strangest feeling, like I was forgetting things before they even happened. I remember one of them looking at me with those black eyes, and for a second I could feel something. Like it wasn't just observing me, it was trying to communicate. Not with words, but with emotions, with intentions. I can't describe it exactly, but I felt like it was telling me something I was supposed to understand. I felt my mind stretch, like something was pushing it further, deeper. I felt like I was being split open, and at the same time, it was like I was becoming more aware, more conscious of everything around me, of myself, of what I was. It's hard to explain, but in that moment I realized how insignificant we are, how fragile. I was nothing, just a tiny speck in the grand scheme of everything, and yet they were still interested in me. Why? I don't know, I couldn't understand, but I could feel the presence of something bigger, something far more advanced, and I felt small. So small. And then, just as suddenly as it all started, I was back in my truck. I was sitting there like I had never moved. The engine was still running, the headlights were still on, and the road was just as empty as before. But it wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my body was drenched in sweat. I felt like I had just woken up from a nightmare, but it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. The feeling of their presence lingered, like a shadow I couldn't shake off. My hands were shaking, and I could barely focus on the road in front of me. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember getting there. All I remember is the feeling of being watched, and it didn't stop. Even now, it hasn't stopped. The days after that night were a blur. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Those black eyes staring back at me, filling my mind with that intense, suffocating pressure. I couldn't make sense of it. My dreams were fragmented, like pieces of broken glass scattered across my mind, flashing moments of that cold, sterile place. I tried to tell myself it was some sort of hallucination, maybe a side effect from exhaustion. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something about it felt too real, too intimate. The worst part was that I couldn't remember much of what happened during the time I was gone. I didn't know how long I was gone or what exactly they did to me. All I knew was that when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. My eyes were different, sharper, more alert. I felt, I don't know, awake, in a way that I'd never felt before. And that terrified me, because I didn't know what had happened to me. But I knew it had changed me. That feeling of being watched never went away. It was like there was always someone, or something, just behind me, watching, waiting. I would catch myself glancing over my shoulder in broad daylight, certain that I wasn't alone. And then there were the flashes, random memories, moments that weren't mine. I couldn't explain them, but I saw them as if I had lived them. A woman in a long flowing robe, her face obscured by shadow, a hallway stretching infinitely, made of the same smooth, liquid-like material I had seen on the ship. The sound of clicking, like machines operating at a frequency I couldn't quite grasp. None of it made sense, but I couldn't shake it. I needed answers. I started going to UFO meetings in my area, trying to find someone who could make sense of what I had experienced. Most of them were just people with wild theories, half-baked ideas about alien conspiracies, but I had to keep searching. There were a few people in those meetings who seemed like they might have experienced something similar. I could tell by the way their eyes flickered when they spoke about the unknown. It was like they knew. They had been where I'd been. They had felt that weight on their souls, too. One man, an older guy who had clearly been in the scene for years, was the first one who didn't dismiss me outright. He leaned in close, his voice low and conspiratorial, and he said, "They're not interested in us like we think. They're not trying to destroy us. They're trying to understand us, but it's more than just studying our biology. It's our minds, our consciousness." At first, I didn't know what he meant, but over time, his words started to make sense. There was something about that experience that went beyond the physical. They weren't just taking samples or running tests. They were probing my thoughts, my sense of self. They were looking into my mind, my awareness, and maybe, just maybe, they were doing it to understand what makes us human. But that didn't make it any less terrifying. They weren't just curious. They were probing for something deeper, something that went beyond just learning about us. And that realization left me shaken to the core. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were preparing for something, like they were getting ready for something bigger, something that involved us all. It wasn't until months later, when I started having the nightmares, that I really began to understand the true horror of what happened. I wasn't just remembering fragments of my time on that ship. I was seeing it. I was reliving it. I woke up one night, drenched in sweat, with the vivid memory of being strapped to some kind of table. I could feel the cold metal against my skin. I could hear the hum of machinery in the background. And there were voices. Not in words, but in sensations. It was like they were talking directly to my mind, sharing thoughts that weren't my own. The sensation of their presence was overwhelming, but it wasn't hostile. It was calculating, clinical. They were searching for something. I wasn't sure what, but they were trying to understand it, understand us, and I could feel that they were disappointed. They hadn't found whatever it was they were looking for. But they would keep looking, keep trying. And that terrified me more than anything. They weren't going to stop. What I felt next was worse. Something snapped in my mind. It was like a part of me, some small piece of myself had been taken, gone, like they had dug into my mind, pulled something out, and left me hollow. The thing was, I couldn't figure out what that missing piece was. It wasn't a memory, it wasn't anything physical, but I knew it was gone, and I could never get it back. That was when I realized that what I'd experienced wasn't just a random encounter. This wasn't something that happened by chance. I wasn't some random person they had stumbled upon in the middle of nowhere. I had been chosen. And whatever they had taken from me, whatever they had done to me, It was part of something bigger, something I wasn't ready to understand, something I didn't want to understand. As the weeks passed, I started noticing more changes, small things at first, like how I could focus on tiny details in the world around me that I hadn't even noticed before. The way the light hit the leaves on a tree, or the texture of the road beneath my tires. It was as if my senses had been heightened. But there was something darker in it, a growing sense of awareness, like I could feel everything more intensely, and sometimes it was unbearable. It wasn't just the world around me that felt different. It was my own mind. It was like I was seeing everything from a new angle, one I couldn't quite explain. I kept hearing that voice in my head. It wasn't a voice exactly, but more like a presence, communicating with me, not in words, but in pure thoughts, emotions. There was an urgency to it now, a sense of something imminent, something big was about to happen. But what terrified me more than anything was the feeling that it was connected to me, that somehow I had become part of whatever was coming, that whatever they had done to me had tied me to their plan. I didn't know how, but I felt it in every fiber of my being. I was not the same. I was different. It was around this time that I started to get these flashes of memories again. Except these weren't memories of my own life. These were memories of things I had never seen before. Images of other places, other beings, alien, distant, flooding my mind in brief bursts. Faces I didn't recognize, landscapes that were nothing like Earth. The worst part was that they didn't feel like dreams. They felt like they were mine, like they had happened to me and I just couldn't remember. Or maybe I had remembered, but it was buried somewhere deep, something that had been pushed out. I couldn't get rid of these flashes, no matter how hard I tried. They kept coming back, over and over, until it felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I began to avoid people, not just because I was afraid they would think I was crazy, but because I didn't know who to trust anymore. My mind wasn't the same. How could I explain to anyone that I wasn't sure if the memories I had were my own? How could I explain the sense of something, someone, always lurking just outside of my consciousness? I felt like I was being watched all the time, even when I was alone. That was when I started to hear stories of others, people who had been through what I had. I found a few online forums, UFO communities where people shared their experiences, hoping to find some kind of comfort in knowing they weren't alone. But all I found were more questions, more confusion. Some stories were similar to mine, others were completely different, but one thing stood out. Everyone who had been taken, or who had encountered these beings, said the same thing. They felt like they were changed, like their very essence had been altered. That scared me more than anything. It wasn't just the abduction, it was the aftermath. It was the knowledge that whatever had been done to us, it didn't stop when we were returned. It followed us. And it was only a matter of time before it consumed us entirely. But the worst part wasn't the fear of what they had done to me. The worst part was the nagging, unshakable thought that they were going to come back. That it wasn't over. That the changes I was feeling were just the beginning of something bigger, something I couldn't control. I don't know how much time passed before it all came crashing down. I remember the night it happened like it was yesterday. I was home, sitting alone in my apartment, just trying to process everything, trying to get a grip on my own mind. It was late, too late for anyone to be out, and the air felt heavy again. That same oppressive feeling I had felt that night in the desert, like something was wrong. I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in around me. I heard a sound, soft at first, like a hum, distant but growing louder. My heart started to race. I knew what it was. I knew what was coming. The temperature in the room dropped, and the shadows in the corners of my apartment seemed to stretch, moving like they had a life of their own. I stood up, panic setting in. I tried to move, to run, but my body felt frozen, like it was being held in place. And then I saw it. The light. It filled the room, shining through the windows, bright and blinding, the same light that had taken me before. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I was trapped in that moment again, that moment I couldn't escape. The pressure on my chest grew stronger, and I knew, without a doubt, that they were here. They had come back. I couldn't even bring myself to close my eyes. I was too afraid that if I did, I wouldn't open them again. I didn't know if I was going to be taken again, or if I had just lost my mind completely. All I knew was that I was no longer in control of my own fate. Whatever was happening, whatever had been happening since that night in the Mojave, it wasn't just some freak occurrence. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The light grew brighter, and I felt an overwhelming pressure in my head, like it was going to burst. I thought I was going to lose myself in the sensation, but then nothing. It all stopped. The light, the pressure, the feeling of being trapped. Everything went completely silent. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, too scared to move, too scared to breathe. For a split second, I thought I had imagined it all. Maybe it had been another nightmare, or just my mind playing tricks on me, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I couldn't explain it, but I knew they were still there. I could feel them. I could feel that presence lingering in the room, in the air around me. But this time, they didn't do anything. They didn't take me again. It was like they were waiting, watching. I stayed there for what felt like hours, just standing in the middle of my apartment, staring at the light outside the window. It was as if time itself had stopped. Eventually, I collapsed on the floor, too exhausted to keep standing. I don't even remember when I finally passed out, but when I woke up, it was morning. The light outside was just the ordinary sunlight. Everything was normal. Too normal. I almost convinced myself it had all been a dream. But then, I checked the mirror. And that's when I knew. My eyes were different. It wasn't just the way I looked, it was the way I saw the world. I wasn't who I was before. I was still me, but I wasn't. Something had changed again. Something deeper this time. It wasn't just physical. It wasn't just psychological. It was like my entire perception had shifted, and I couldn't go back. I tried to tell myself that it was over, that they were gone. But deep down I knew they were still out there, watching, waiting. I started researching anything I could find on alien abductions, trying to piece together some kind of explanation for what I was going through. There were things I couldn't ignore anymore, things that didn't make sense before, but now they were screaming at me from every article and book I read. The missing time, the physical changes, the heightened sense of awareness, and the worst part, the feeling that they were still inside my head, watching every thought I had, every movement I made. Some of the things I read mirrored my experience exactly. People who had been taken described the same feelings of being watched, the same odd sense of unity with whatever they had encountered. Some of them even talked about hearing voices in their heads after the experience, similar to the sensations I had felt. I couldn't tell if these stories were helping or making everything worse. But the more I read, the more I realized that I wasn't the only one. There were others out there, people who had experienced what I had, people who were still struggling with the aftermath. And that was the part that kept me awake at night. The knowledge that whatever had happened to me wasn't a fluke. It wasn't just a freak accident. It was something bigger, a larger plan, something I couldn't comprehend, something I didn't want to comprehend. The more I learned, the more I realized how helpless I was. I couldn't stop it. Whatever it was, I couldn't stop it. I started having trouble holding on to things, memories, thoughts, even the things I used to care about. They felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. My relationships with friends and family began to crumble. I pushed them all away because I didn't know how to explain what I was going through. I couldn't even explain it to myself. There were moments when I'd find myself staring at a book or a piece of paper, unable to remember what it was I was supposed to be doing. Like something inside me had been scrambled, and I couldn't find the right pieces to put back together. I would hear that voice again. No, not a voice, but a presence. And it would tell me in that strange telepathic way that I wasn't alone, that I was never alone. They were always there, always watching, and worse, they knew what I was, thinking before I did. They knew what I was going to do before I even made a decision, and it wasn't just a feeling of being watched. It was like I was being guided, manipulated even. I wasn't in control anymore. They were, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. But it didn't end there. No, it got worse. One night, after weeks of feeling like I was losing my grip on reality, I was in my apartment, sitting at my desk, trying to put together some semblance of normalcy, when I felt it again. The pressure, the weight in the air, and then the light. I tried to run, tried to leave, but I couldn't move. My body was frozen. It felt like my soul was being pulled in two different directions, and then I heard them again. This time, they spoke directly to me, their presence in my mind so overwhelming, so undeniable, that I felt like I was about to explode. "We are here," they said. "You will remember." I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I couldn't even breathe. The next thing I knew, I was standing outside, staring up at the sky, the stars twinkling brightly above me. But something was different. The sky wasn't the same. It felt artificial, like I was looking at a projection. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. I just stood there, feeling like I was being pulled into something much larger than myself. And that's when I realized the truth. They hadn't taken me once, they hadn't taken me twice. They had taken me over, completely. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I was back in my apartment. Everything seemed normal again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed. It was like I had been handed the key to something I wasn't ready to understand, and I couldn't forget the last thing they told me. "You will remember." What did that mean? What was I supposed to remember? There were gaps in my memory, pieces missing that I couldn't find. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't explain it. And the worst part, I don't know if I ever will. It feels like I'm just waiting for something, for the next step in whatever this is, but I have no control over it. I can't fight it. I can't run from it. They're here, and they're inside me. They know me better than I know myself. and one day they will come for me again. But I won't be able to fight them, because they never really left. They've always been here, watching, waiting. And the worst part, I can feel it again. The pressure, the weight in the air. It's happening again. They're coming back. I don't know how I know it, but I can feel it deep in my bones. Whatever this is, whatever they've done to me, it's not over. Not by a long shot. And when they come again, I won't be able to stop them. None of us will. Second story, Abducted in the Empty Night, 1994. It was just another one of those days in the desert, you know. I'd been driving for hours on that long stretch of the Mojave, the kind of place where the heat wraps around you like a heavy blanket, and there's nothing but the road and the occasional scraggly bush to keep you company. I was alone, doing a routine drive, nothing strange about it. I remember thinking how peaceful it all was, how vast and quiet, but also a little unnerving. Maybe it was just the solitude, but something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. The sun was setting, painting the sky in that burnt orange hue, and I decided to pull over, stretch my legs. I figured I'd take a break before I pressed on. That's when it happened. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light. There was this bright, almost blinding flash in the corner of my eye. I turned my head, and that's when I saw it, hovering above me. A ship, or craft, or whatever you want to call it. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before, and trust me, I've seen my share of weird things. Being in the audio industry, you come across strange stuff all the time, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what happened next. I can't say for sure what happened right after that. It's like my memory went blank for a second, but then I was inside this craft, or whatever it was. I wasn't alone. There were these beings. I don't even know how to describe them properly. They didn't look like anything from the movies or those typical gray alien sketches you see online. They were taller, with smooth, pale skin. Their faces weren't as detailed as humans, just these smooth, featureless surfaces with eyes that were almost too dark, like black holes. And they were looking at me, not with aggression, but with curiosity. And that's when it hit me. They weren't speaking out loud, but I could feel their thoughts like they were in my head, nudging their way into my mind. It wasn't like a voice exactly, it was more like knowing. I knew what they wanted, and in return I think they knew everything about me too. It's hard to explain, but I felt exposed. Like they could see my thoughts, my deepest fears, my memories, everything. But they didn't seem judgmental, just inquisitive. And that's when they started showing me things. I wish I could say I knew exactly what was happening to me in that moment, but I didn't. It was like I was being studied, examined in a way that didn't feel invasive but still unsettling. I wasn't strapped down or anything, but it was like I couldn't move. Not physically, at least. I could feel my body, but it was almost like it didn't belong to me anymore. I wasn't in control of it. I remember floating, or at least feeling like I was floating, and the room, if you can call it that, around me was metallic and smooth, like the inside of a spaceship, but somehow cleaner, sterile almost. There were panels on the walls, glowing faintly, and every once in a while, something would shift. I didn't see anyone else, but I could sense their presence. These beings or entities just outside my field of vision, all around me, scanning, analyzing. And then they showed me images. Not like pictures, but more like impressions. They showed me entire ecosystems on other planets, vast landscapes with creatures I couldn't even begin to describe. The weirdest part? I wasn't afraid, not at first. I should have been, I know. But there was something about the whole experience that felt almost academic, like I was part of some grand experiment. Something told me they were trying to understand us, how we process information, how we think. The images they showed me were unlike anything I could have ever imagined. There were scenes from distant worlds, far beyond anything I've ever seen or even heard of. I could see creatures. Some were massive, with scales and wings, while others were small like insects, but much more intelligent. There was a planet with water that seemed to ripple in a way that didn't make sense, as if the laws of physics didn't apply the same way they did here. And then there were flashes of technology, machines that moved in ways I can't describe. Things that didn't fit into our human understanding of machinery. And through it all, I was aware of their presence, these beings, studying me, trying to understand how I was processing these images. It felt like they were testing me, but not in a cruel way. It was like they were learning too, learning about us through my reaction, through how my brain made sense of their world. It was surreal, and in a way it was almost comforting, despite the fact that I was trapped in a place that wasn't of this earth. I wish I could tell you I had some big epiphany during that time, that something about our place in the universe made sense, but I didn't. In fact, it made everything feel more confusing. I started to feel the weight of it all, the implications of what was happening. The more I saw, the more I realized just how insignificant we are in the grand scheme of things. They didn't speak to me in words, but through emotions and images. They weren't threatening. They weren't hostile. But it wasn't comforting either. There was this strange distance, like they were detached from us, like we were just lab rats, and they were studying us with clinical curiosity. I could feel my heart racing as they flashed these alien landscapes and life forms at me, like they were waiting for me to understand something. I don't know if I did, but I know one thing. I was no longer alone. They were there, watching, probing, in a way that felt far too intimate. I could feel their thoughts as clearly as my own. At one point, one of the beings, or maybe it was just a presence, I can't be sure, came closer to me. It didn't touch me, but I felt it move closer in my mind, like it was reaching out to me. I don't know how I knew, but I understood it wanted to communicate more directly, maybe to make sure I understood what was happening, or maybe it was just curious. It wasn't a voice, it wasn't a sound. It was like a sudden understanding of things, like all the knowledge I'd never had access to suddenly flooded into my brain. I could feel it. Waves of information coming at me all at once. It was overwhelming, but I couldn't stop it. I couldn't block it out. My brain was reeling from the overload. It was like someone had crammed a lifetime of knowledge into my head in a matter of seconds. Concepts and ideas I had no words for were filling me up. The strangest thing was, even as I struggled to make sense of it, I could sense that they knew I couldn't fully understand. They weren't trying to make me learn everything. They were just showing me, observing how I processed the unknown. As all of this was happening, time lost all meaning. I couldn't tell if minutes were passing, hours or days. The sense of time was gone, replaced by this overwhelming sense of being studied, of being a part of something I couldn't comprehend. Every now and then, I'd catch glimpses of the beings around me, their dark eyes watching from the edges of my perception, like shadows in my peripheral vision. but no matter how hard I tried to focus on them, they never fully came into view. It was as if they weren't entirely there, or maybe I just wasn't capable of perceiving them in the way they existed. Whatever the case, it was unsettling. More unsettling than anything else about this whole experience. It was like I was both an object of fascination and utterly irrelevant at the same time. But then, as suddenly as it all began, the images stopped. The pressure on my mind let up, and for a brief moment I could think clearly again. I could breathe. But that didn't mean I was out of danger, not by a long shot. The next part is the one I'll never forget. It's not just the part that haunts me the most, it's the part that completely shattered everything I thought I knew about reality. The room I was in, or whatever it was, started to change. It wasn't a physical transformation, but a sensation that came over me. The air felt thicker, almost like it was closing in. And then there was this noise, this hum, like a frequency that resonated directly in my bones. It made my teeth vibrate, my insides felt like they were being shaken apart. I remember thinking that it wasn't just the ship or craft that was altering around me. Something was changing in me, like they were doing something to my mind, my consciousness. I can't explain how, but I felt it. I felt like I was being rewired. I'm not talking about any physical pain, nothing like that. But it was more like the way your thoughts can spiral out of control in a panic attack, like the very foundation of how you think was being taken apart and reassembled. I couldn't understand what was happening. It felt like they were dissecting my mind, looking for something, trying to understand how a human mind works, how a human mind thinks. Then, it got worse, much worse. I started to see things, feel things that I couldn't explain. It was like my senses were on overdrive. I could feel the presence of the beings around me more intensely than before. It wasn't just their thoughts anymore. I could sense their movements, their emotions, their intent. It wasn't comforting. It was like I could feel their hunger. Not physical hunger, but something deeper, something more primal. I don't know how I knew, but I could feel that they were searching for something specific, and that's when it hit me. They were not just observing, they weren't just studying, they were after something. I don't know if it was knowledge, or if it was something about us, about humans, that they wanted. But the feeling was undeniable. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was a hunger, an emptiness they were trying to fill, and it scared the hell out of me. The fear hit me then, like a wave crashing over me. I tried to move, tried to speak, but I couldn't. It was as if my body was still there, but I couldn't access it. I couldn't communicate. I don't know how long I was stuck in that state. Maybe seconds, maybe longer, but every second felt like an eternity. I was floating there, helpless, and I couldn't do a thing to stop it. The beings, or whatever they were, seemed to sense my panic. I could feel them pulling away just a little, but their presence remained, looming in my mind like a shadow I couldn't escape. They weren't done with me. They weren't letting me go. The next thing I remember was the sensation of moving, like I was being lifted or pulled. But I didn't see anything around me, no lights or corridors or anything. It was like I was in some void, suspended in space, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My mind was racing. My body, though, was completely still. It was like I was trapped in my own head. And then, just as abruptly as it all began, it stopped. The pressure, the weight, the suffocating fear, it was gone. Just like that. I don't remember the exact moment I was back on the ground, but I know when I woke up I was lying face down in the sand. The desert was silent, too silent. I could feel the heat of the sun on my back, but it wasn't like it had been before. It was like I'd been gone for much longer than I realized. The whole experience felt like a nightmare, but I knew it wasn't. I could still feel the residue of it in my mind. The images, the knowledge, the feeling of their presence. I sat up, confused, disoriented, and looked around. There was nothing. Just the endless stretch of sand and sky. But something was wrong. The whole landscape felt off. Not like it had changed, but like I had. I felt like I wasn't the same person who had pulled over by the side of the road earlier. Like a part of me had been left behind. Taken, maybe. I stood up and checked myself. My clothes were dusty, like I'd been lying there for hours. But there was nothing else to indicate I'd been taken. I didn't have any marks, no physical signs that anything had happened, but I knew something had happened, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer alone in my own mind. I made my way back to my car, trying to put it all together. The whole thing didn't make sense. How long had I been out there? What did they want from me? Why did it feel like I was changed? Like something was missing from me that I couldn't get back? When I reached the car, I checked the time. It was almost dark. I couldn't believe how much time had passed. Hours, at least. It felt like I had just been in the desert for a few minutes, but it was almost nightfall. I started the car and drove off, but it wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. I kept expecting to see something in the rearview mirror, some sign that something was following me, but there was nothing. The road stretched on, just like it always had, and the desert remained still. But the weight of it all sat on my shoulders. I knew what I had experienced. I knew what I had seen, what I had felt, even though no one would believe me. And that's the worst part. The isolation, the silence. Not just the desert, but the quiet in my own mind. I couldn't stop thinking about the beings, about the hunger I felt from them, the way they looked at me, studied me. I had no answers, no closure. And somehow I knew that was the point. I wasn't meant to understand. I wasn't meant to remember. And yet, every night since that day, I felt something else, something watching. It's not obvious, not like a physical presence, but it's there, lingering, just out of reach. And I can't shake it. I don't think I ever will. After that night, I tried to tell a few people, friends, family, but of course, nobody believed me. They just looked at me like I was crazy, maybe even scared of me. They didn't say anything, but I could tell. That's the thing about these kinds of experiences. You can't prove them. Not in any way that matters. People just look at you like you're nuts, or that you're making it up for attention. And so I kept it to myself. I went back to my life, but nothing felt the same. I couldn't shake the feeling that the experience had marked me in some way, changed me in a way I couldn't explain. I started having nightmares. Not about the beings, not about the ship, but about being trapped. About being inside that void, that emptiness. And sometimes, when I'd wake up in the middle of the night, I'd feel this sensation. A feeling that I wasn't truly alone. That something was still out there, watching, waiting. I don't know if it's just my mind playing tricks on me or if something really did follow me back. But I can tell you this, every time I look up at the night sky, I wonder. I wonder if they're still out there and if they ever plan on coming back. It's been years now, and I still think about that day. The memories of it are still vivid, like they happened yesterday. I don't know what they wanted, what they did to me, but the more I think about it, the more I realize how little I actually understand about what happened. The only thing I'm sure of is that it wasn't a dream. It wasn't my mind playing tricks. What I saw, what I felt, that was real. And I don't know why it happened. Maybe it was just an accident. Maybe I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I do know this: nothing has been the same since. The way I look at the world, the way I look at the night sky, it's all changed. I've tried to move on, but I don't think I ever will. Not completely, because somewhere out there in the vastness of space, I know I'm not the only one. And I'm not sure I'll ever be free from the feeling that they're still watching, waiting. So, I don't know what you make of all this. Maybe you think I'm crazy. Maybe you think I'm just telling some tall tale. But if you've ever felt the way I do, if you've ever had an experience that doesn't make sense and can't be explained, then you might understand. You might get why, even though I want to forget it all, I can't. Because once you've had an encounter like that, once you've been in the presence of something that's not from this world, you can never go back to the way things were before. I'm not sure what they wanted or why they chose me. Maybe it doesn't even matter. But the one thing I do know is that whatever happened out there in that desert, it's still with me, and I don't think it'll ever leave. I'm still waiting for it to come back. Third story, The Alien Warning, 1990. I don't know where to begin. I've never spoken about what happened to me that day, at least not in this much detail, but it feels like it's been eating me from the inside out, like I'm supposed to tell someone, anyone. I've been to the Mojave Desert many times, just driving out to clear my head or looking for a quiet place to think. It's peaceful out there, the endless stretch of sand and the quiet that makes you feel like you're in another world. It was in the summer of 1990, and I had been driving for hours, the sun beating down hard, and the heat making everything shimmer in the distance. I had this weird feeling that day, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was just the isolation, or the long drive. I wasn't thinking much of it when it started. There was this light. I remember it so vividly, this intense, blinding flash that came out of nowhere. I squinted at it, but it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. It wasn't the sun, it wasn't a reflection, and it wasn't a car. It was almost like the light was alive, if that makes sense. I tried to look away, but my vision blurred, and then everything went dark. I woke up what felt like moments later, but I could tell that time had passed. I wasn't in my car anymore, not in the desert. I wasn't even on Earth. It was like I was in a completely different place, something cold and metallic, with smooth walls and a strange hum in the air. It felt wrong. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could barely move at first, my body heavy and disoriented. I don't know how long I laid there, trying to make sense of what was happening. My mind was foggy, and all I could do was feel the panic creeping in. Then I saw them. They were standing around me, these beings. They didn't look like anything I'd seen before, but somehow they weren't completely alien either. They were humanoid, tall and thin, but their skin had this pale, almost translucent quality to it. They didn't have any hair, and their eyes were huge, black and glossy, but they didn't seem to be staring at me with malice. There was no aggression, no sense of urgency. They were calm, almost detached. Their presence was so overpowering that I couldn't focus on anything else. They moved with this eerie grace, like they were in complete control of their surroundings, but they didn't say a word. It was like they communicated with me, but without speaking. I couldn't understand it fully, but it was like they were trying to calm me down. I don't remember everything that happened after that, but I do remember being placed on what looked like an operating table. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. It was like my body wasn't responding to me, but I wasn't in pain. I was aware of everything, of them moving around me, poking and prodding at my body. I wasn't sure if it was a physical examination or if they were doing something else entirely. One of them seemed to be more focused on me than the others, almost studying me. I could feel its eyes on me, but I couldn't look away from the ceiling above. It wasn't like a normal ceiling, though. It was strange. I remembered the lights on the ceiling being like nothing I'd ever seen before. They didn't cast shadows. They were just there, everywhere. And the strange thing is, even though I couldn't move, I wasn't scared anymore. It was like all the fear I had when I first woke up was slowly melting away, replaced by this unsettling calm. But that calm didn't last. Suddenly, images started flooding my mind, images of Earth, of cities, of nature. But they were distorted, warped, like I was seeing the future. The cities were decaying, abandoned. There were fires, floods, storms. The earth was breaking apart. It was like they were showing me what was going to happen if we didn't change, if we didn't take care of the planet. It wasn't just some vague thought. It was like they were forcing me to see it, to understand it. And I did. I couldn't stop it. The worst part. I couldn't tell if it was something I was just imagining or if they were making me see it. It felt real. Too real. After what felt like an eternity, I was no longer on the table. I didn't feel any movement, no transition, no gradual shift. One moment I was in that sterile, cold place, and the next I was standing on the desert floor, right back where I had been before. The heat of the sun was harsh against my skin, and the silence of the desert had returned. But something was off. It was like the world around me had shifted slightly, like I was in the same place, but also not at all. I couldn't explain it. I stood there disoriented, trying to understand how I had gotten there, trying to recall what had happened, but it was like I had forgotten how to think. I felt different, and I wasn't alone. I looked around, expecting to see the figures again, but there was nothing, just the wind blowing sand and the harsh desert sun. It took me a while to gather my thoughts, but something inside me told me to get back to my car, to drive away from this place. I stumbled toward the vehicle, feeling like I was moving in slow motion. The world seemed to be spinning a little, and I kept hearing that hum in my ears, like it was still there, still lingering in the background. But the worst part wasn't the physical disorientation. It was the deep, aching sense of urgency that had settled into my chest. It was like they wanted me to do something, like I had been given a message, and I wasn't sure what it was. I got in my car, hands shaking as I turned the key. The engine roared to life, but I barely felt like I was in control. I remember gripping the steering wheel too tight, my knuckles white, trying to stay focused on the road. But the images kept flashing in my mind, those glimpses of the future, the burning cities, the shattered landscape, the desolation. And somewhere in the back of my mind I kept hearing that voice, not out loud, but in my head, telling me I had to warn people. I had to tell someone about what I had seen, what was coming. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't, it would be my fault. The drive back felt endless. The heat of the day pressing down on me, the desert stretching out, empty and oppressive. It wasn't until I was a few miles out of the Mojave that I finally started to feel like I could breathe again. I was in control of my body, my mind, but the sense of dread hadn't left. If anything, it had only intensified. I kept thinking about the beings, their calmness, their cold detachment. It was like they knew something I didn't, like they had seen the future, too, and they were just waiting for it to unfold. I don't remember how long it took me to get home, but it didn't matter. I had to tell someone. I needed to find answers, and I needed to warn people. But no one believed me. Not at first. I called a few close friends, but I could tell from their voices that they didn't think I was serious. They asked if I'd been drinking or maybe if I was just tired. When I told them what happened, they thought it was some kind of joke or that I had just hallucinated it all. Maybe I did. But deep down, I knew what I saw, what I felt, what I experienced. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. Even now, years later, I still see it. I still feel the weight of what they showed me, and I can't stop thinking about it. Sometimes, I feel like I'm losing my mind, like I'm still stuck in that moment, still hovering between this world and whatever place they took me to. I've tried to talk to others who claim to have had similar experiences, but it's never the same. It's never as real as what happened to me. Maybe I wasn't the only one. Maybe there are more out there. People who were shown the same thing, given the same warning. I don't know. I wish I could forget, but I can't. I can't shake the feeling that something's coming, something bad, and no one will listen to me. It's been almost a year since that day, and I can't seem to find peace. I've tried to go back to normal life, tried to bury the memory deep down, but it keeps resurfacing. Some nights, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the hum of that place, that ship, I guess. It's not even the fear of what happened that bothers me anymore. It's the overwhelming sense of helplessness. Like I'm just a spectator in some grand cosmic play, and no matter what I do, nothing will change the outcome. The visions they showed me, the decay of everything, the earth literally coming apart at the seams. I can't unsee it. The worst part is that I know now, in my gut, that there's nothing I can do to stop it. I've tried to tell people, even tried to reach out to environmental groups, but they just brush me off as some kind of crackpot. Who would believe me? Who would believe that I saw the future of the Earth through the eyes of beings who weren't, even from this planet? Sometimes I wonder if they did it on purpose. If they showed me these things to make me feel powerless. And if they were trying to break me, well, it's working. There are nights when I can't even sleep anymore. The images flood my mind over and over, and I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling that same cold dread from the desert creeping up my spine. I've tried everything to get some answers. I've read books, researched other abduction cases, even reached out to people who claim to know more about these things. Some say it's just a form of manipulation, or that my mind created the whole experience as a way of coping with something else. But none of it makes sense. The feelings, the sensations, the overwhelming presence of those beings was real. What I felt in that moment wasn't something my mind could have just made up. And the worst part is, I don't think they're gone. I can't explain why, but there are times when I feel like they're still watching me. Like they're waiting, for me to do something to act on what they showed me. But I don't know what that something is. All I know is that I'm not the same person anymore. I don't look at the world the way I did before. I've become obsessed with environmental issues, with trying to make people understand how fragile this planet is. But it's like no one hears me. Every time I try to talk about it, I feel like I'm just shouting into the void. Maybe that's what they want. Maybe they want me to keep pushing forward, to warn as many people as I can, but nothing changes. People don't listen. It's like they don't care, or maybe they just don't see it the way I do. And I'm terrified that by the time they do see it, it'll be too late. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending that I haven't been marked by something that I don't understand. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm just going crazy. I really do. I'm not the same person I was before that day. I feel like I've lost pieces of myself, like parts of my mind are slipping away, and I can't get them back. I've tried to talk to a therapist, but they just look at me like I'm nuts. They tell me that trauma can cause people to experience hallucinations or distorted memories, but I know what I saw. I know what I felt. No one can take that away from me. I remember their eyes, their calmness, the way they seemed to know everything, like they were just waiting for us to catch up. They didn't seem angry, didn't seem upset, just disappointed. Like they had seen this coming for a long time, and we were too late to change anything. Maybe that's why I keep hearing that hum in my head, that low, constant vibration. Maybe it's them, still there, still watching, still waiting. And every time I think about it, it's like the weight of the world presses down harder on my chest. I try to distract myself, watch movies, go for walks, talk to friends, but nothing helps. The images come back, uninvited, flooding my mind when I least expect it. And I keep hearing that voice, not in words, but in my head, telling me that the time is running out, that we're running out of time. And I don't know what to do with it. It's been weeks now since I last wrote anything about this. Honestly, I've been trying to distract myself as much as possible, but it's been getting harder to keep the panic at bay. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, my heart racing, and I feel like I'm still there. Still in that place, still surrounded by those beings. Even though I haven't seen them again, I feel their presence in the back of my mind, like they're just waiting for me to do something, to remember something. Last week I tried to drive back to the Mojave desert. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would bring me some sort of closure, or that if I went back, I could somehow figure it all out. But when I got there, something was wrong. It wasn't like before. The desert felt different. I can't even explain it. It was as if the very air had changed, like the land had shifted in some subtle, disturbing way. I parked my car and sat there, looking out over the vast emptiness, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. Nothing except that familiar, unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. The one that tells you that something is wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. I stayed for a while, hoping for an answer, but I didn't get one. All I got was a deep, overwhelming sense of dread, and I ended up leaving feeling more lost than ever. Since then, I've stopped trying to figure it out. I still don't know what happened to me that day or why it happened. There are too many questions with no answers, and I've learned that there are some things you just can't explain. But I can't stop thinking about what they showed me, what they made me see. It haunts me, the images of the earth falling apart, the storm clouds, the floods, the burning cities. And I don't think it's something I can ever forget. I can't shake the feeling that I've been marked, that whatever they showed me was a warning. A warning that I'm supposed to do something about. But what? How can one person make a difference? How can anyone make a difference when the damage has already been done? I don't know, but I can't shake this urge to warn others, to tell anyone who will listen about what I saw, about what I know is coming. Even if no one believes me, even if they think I'm crazy, I have to keep trying. I have to find a way to make them understand. I don't know what else to do. There are nights when I can feel them watching me. It's subtle, just a feeling, but it's there, like they're still keeping track of me, waiting for me to do something. I don't know why I feel that way. Maybe it's just paranoia, or maybe it's the memory, the trauma, still crawling under my skin. But there are times when I swear I hear that hum again, low and constant, almost like it's vibrating in the air around me. Sometimes I'll be sitting in my living room or lying in bed, and I'll hear it, just faintly, like a distant echo. And I'll feel this cold, heavy pressure on my chest, like something is pressing down on me, forcing me to pay attention. When it happens, I can't shake the thought that they're still out there, still waiting for me. But I can't stop myself from wondering if what I saw was real, or if it was something else, something my mind created. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. Maybe I made it up because I couldn't handle the thought of our planet dying, the idea of everything falling apart. But no matter how much I tell myself that, I know deep down that I can't ignore what I felt. I can't ignore that I saw it, and that's what scares me the most, knowing that no matter how much time passes, I'll never be able to forget. I still don't have any answers, but I'm starting to accept that maybe I'm not supposed to. Maybe the truth is something so huge, so terrifying, that I'm not meant to understand it fully. Maybe I'm just a small part of something much bigger. But even though I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with this knowledge, I can't help but feel like it's part of me now, like I'm forever tied to that moment, to that place. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to break free from it. I think about the beings, the way they just knew. They didn't seem worried, didn't seem scared. It was like they had already accepted what was coming, and they were just waiting for us to catch up. And that's what haunts me more than anything. The fact that they didn't seem concerned. They just watched. I don't know why I was chosen, or why it happened to me, but part of me feels like it's my responsibility now to share what I saw, to keep warning people. Even if no one believes me, even if I sound crazy, I have to keep going. Maybe that's what they want. Maybe that's why they showed me what they did. To make sure someone like me, would be out there, shouting into the wind, even if no one listens. I've thought a lot about what I can do next. There's no going back, no undoing what happened. I can't change the future I saw, but maybe I can change the way I look at the present. I don't know if it'll make a difference, but I've started doing everything I can to raise awareness, to talk about the environment, about the state of the world. Every chance I get, I try to push this message, but I can see the doubt in people's eyes when I talk. I know they think I'm crazy, that I'm just some eccentric person obsessed with an idea that no one else can see. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And maybe that's enough. Maybe I'm not supposed to change everything. Maybe my purpose now is just to keep the message alive, to pass it on to others who will listen, no matter how few they are. There's a part of me that still feels that dread, that cold weight on my chest when I think about what they showed me. But it's also a reminder that I can't stop. Even if the world doesn't listen, I won't stop. Not until I've said everything I need to say. and I don't know if I'll ever have peace. Part of me hopes that one day I'll find answers, that the mystery will be solved. But deep down, I feel like the truth will always be just out of reach. I've tried to move on, tried to live a normal life, but it's impossible when a part of you is still trapped in that moment, in that place. Sometimes I wonder if it'll ever stop, if the images and the feelings will fade away with time. But deep down, I know they won't. Because whatever happened to me out there in the desert was real. It wasn't a dream. And I'll carry it with me for the rest of my life, whether I like it or not. It's like I've been touched by something beyond human comprehension, and that knowledge will stay with me, haunting me, until the day I die. But I've learned to live with it. And maybe that's the only thing I can do. Just keep going, even when it feels like the world is moving faster than I can catch up. I'll keep warning people even if no one believes me. Because I know what I saw. And I know that one day someone, somewhere, will listen. Maybe not today, but someday.